Welcome back. Today we're focusing on how to maximize your success in what is traditionally in many markets a slower fourth quarter.
That's right. So don't overreact. The market is slowing, but that's normal for this time of year. Tuck your drama in and get back to work. If you expect buyers and sellers to transact with you, you must be educated, motivated, and proactive. Here's a fact. Some homes will sell immediately with multiple offers. Some of you are experiencing that. I certainly hear that from our coaches and coaching clients. However, sometimes they won't. Be able to handle both situations with skill and don't get caught flat-footed with the second scenario. According to Lawrence Yun from NAR, homes are sitting on the market a bit longer and sellers are receiving fewer offers. More buyers are insisting on home inspections and appraisals, and inventory is definitely rising on a national basis.
Here's something Julie and we talked about that this morning on our walk. All these things, all these points. But what you and I, it's palatable, right? You feel it this time of year, especially when you have your core software is real estate, right?
Yeah, we still feel it.
I know.
We're coaching all the time.
Exactly. But fourth quarter, when things get slower, it's a bit of a psychological, it's challenging because you have to condition yourself for it to be slower, even though you don't want it to be. You have to be, then what happens as soon as things get slower, what a lot of agents will do is they'll start doubting themselves and they'll start, questioning whether or not they're going to be able to build momentum again and all these other things. They don't realize that really the slow time of year is, frankly, right now is one of the best times of year to really build great momentum. And sometimes that emotional quagmire, it sort of manifests a lot of bad behaviors, spending time doing the wrong things. Yeah. So what we want to do on today's show is we're going to really drill down and really help you to be very clear. Our podcast, our content is always practical and tactical, but we're going to slip in a lot of bonus points too in today's podcast. So get ready to take a lot of great notes. Now, speaking of notes, if you want today's notes for today's podcast, you have to be a subscriber to harrisrealestatedaily.com. That is our exclusive newsletter. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes 2 seconds to subscribe. Just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. I think there's 27 or 28,000 of you that have subscribed to the newsletter, and that's fantastic. You get the newsletter every single day. Yesterday's podcast and notes are sent directly to you in the morning. So make sure you go to harrisrealestatedaily.com and subscribe. Now remember, when you do subscribe, do that now. Just drop your email address in. That's all you have to do into the little address bar. And then you have to go to your email itself and you have to confirm that you want the subscription. Sometimes you guys are forgetting to do that part of it too. But you do that, and then we will be giving you the newsletter every single day, no strings attached. So make sure you do that right away.
All right, so just because there are more price reductions, expired listings, and higher rates than we'd like, doesn't mean the market's about to crash. Fewer sales are occurring, that's true, and the business has become more challenging for most agents. Add to that the typical holiday, fourth quarter slowdown, and you may need to polish your skills and, of course, your mindset. So today's podcast is designed to reduce your stress by providing better strategies so you can still reach your goals this quarter.
Julie,
and as you often say, Tim, what you do fourth quarter really does set your trajectory for the following year. It's perhaps the most important time for you to actually buckle down and have strategies versus holing up and hibernating. And, we want you to have fun holidays with your family and your friends, of course. But we also always remind you to mark the days on your calendar you're working and mark off the days that you're not working. I just had this conversation with Tammy Irby, one of our great coaching clients in Northern Virginia, who is very clear. I think she's been in business more than 30 years, and she sees this cycle. This is not a surprise to her, but she still has to work on her mindset and talk herself into doing what she doesn't want to do when she doesn't want to do it at the highest level. And she's somebody who knows how to do it at the highest level. So be like Tammy.
Well, so you and I were talking numbers this morning.
Yes.
And you remember you were citing the fact that it's projected there could be as few as 3.8 million sales this year. Mm-hmm. And really for the market to even come close to meeting the actual demand, there needed to have been 5.5 million sales. Mm-hmm. And this is like the third year where the numbers have been going in that direction.
Sure.
So that tells you, dear listener, that there's a massive pent-up demand for housing. And it's just going to be intensified into really 2025. So interest rates fall, interest rates rise. It doesn't really matter. The demand is always going to be there. The thing that's holding the market up right now, frankly, is lack of inventory, which frankly, again, is being cured. We're seeing a lot of markets where there hasn't been a lot of inventory. Markets that Julie and I follow closely. We have a lot of rental properties around the country. And inventory is building. Now, in some markets, you have what some people are labeling a buyer's market. So just be aware of what's going on in the market. But do know that if you are experiencing a little heightened sense of anxiety this time of year, it's normal. That's totally normal. And if you're not necessarily on track with where you wanted your goals to be for this year, again, that's normal because think about what I said. There's 5.5 million home sales, which would have been a balanced market this year. That's what, realistically there should have been, but there were only 3.8 million home sales. That's a pretty staggering difference in the number of sales. So if you see your own business off, but frankly, by 5% or 10%, but the rest of the market was off by 35, 36%, believe it or not, you should count that in the win category because you did better than what the overall market was doing.
You beat the odds.
You beat the odds. I know that's not necessarily the greatest news ever, but it is the reality. Now, we do have some of our coaching clients, a lot of you, who are doing better than ever. Now, why are you doing things better than ever? Because you've been preparing for this market for like the last 3 or 4 years. If you're listening to Julie and I for the first time, you can catch up, but you just really have to drill down, not allow yourself to get really, I think, distracted by all the shiny objects in real estate. So keep all these things in mind that, the realities of the numbers, that really should set the stage for what will be a fantastic 2025 forward. And, that doesn't mean you're going to have a fantastic year, or it doesn't, you have to take the right actions now to lock in what your next year is going to be.
That's right. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. You have to own it.
Yep.
So point number one, again, we're going to talk about several different things, but all of this is real world strategies and solutions because here's what's happened. Not every deal that you do is going to act the same. Not every home is going to have appreciated at the same level. Not every home is going to have multiple offers. Some of them are going to sit longer than others. In a few cases, it seems like nobody even knows that your house is on the market or your listing is on the market. You get slow or no showings. So we're going to talk about a variety of things that we are taking right out of our coaching client scenarios. Point number one, set your seller's expectations. We're talking about listings. Set your seller's expectations for 2 scenarios. Yes, it may sell right away, possibly with multiple offers. However, if it does not sell right away, what does that do to your seller's plans? Understand your seller's motivation and their time frame and discuss different scenarios, ideally after you have the listing signed, but before the first showing. What are the average days on the market for your subject property? Please don't assume that it's 10 or less or even 30 or less because it depends on the market conditions. Now, nationally, the average number of days on the market has risen to 61. For some of you, that sounds like housing Armageddon. It's not that bad. It's still just 2 months. However, what it's doing is nearly 10% of listed homes are not selling the first time they're listed. 47% of last month's homes sold for less than full list price as well. So there's a lot of stats in that. Average days on the market for the country, 61. 10% are becoming expireds. Some of them relist, some of them don't. 47% actually sold for less than list price. So you can see a bifurcation in how the outcome can be. If you've got a seller that says, I'm relocating next month, I've got to get this done. I don't want 2 mortgages. I want to move my family at the same time. Your pricing strategy is going to be different than somebody who's building a house that's not done for 10 months.
Well, you should have known all this prior to going on the appointment. Remember
Yes.
the 7-step listing process. Generate the lead, and then you're supposed to pre-qualify the lead, right? So if you're pre-qualifying, you're going to know what all their motivations and time frames are prior to going to the next step, which is sending the pre-listing package, right? All this is laid out for you with a lot of detail in Premier Coaching. If you're not a Premier Coaching client, there's a great idea. You can enroll right now for free. Just go to premiercoaching.com, or you can just text the word Premier to 47372. Julie was talking about listing term there, and where my mind went was none of you should ever have an expired listing. Now, A, because you're going to get the listing sold, but B, because expired listings happen typically when agents don't understand what's going on in the market, and the listing contract itself is too short. And again, if you're coming into this market with the expectation that something's going to sell in less than 61 days and it doesn't, but you've only listed the house for 90 days, chances are you're not going to have the listing when it sells, which, by the way, is the biggest secret in real estate. If you want to be a successful listing agent, you guys should write this down, never forget it. It's kind of a joke, but it's true. Have the listing when it sells. That's it. If you want to be a successful listing agent, have the listing when it sells. One of the, frankly, the little shortcuts for understanding how to move past the seller's fear of having a long listing term is giving them an easy exit listing. And we teach you guys how to do that in Premier Coaching. And the gist of it is you're going to sign the listing contract with the seller with no end date. Now, if your MLS requires one, you might want to put it out 12 months. The seller's going to, oh, no, I'm not signing a 12-month listing contract. And you explain to the seller, well, Mr. Seller, you understand when you list your house with me, you actually have an easy exit listing. If for any reason you're not 100% satisfied with the services I'm providing, you could fire me with no strings attached. Now, there's some carve-outs to, protect you in the event that one of the buyers that you represented or a co-op brought to the house, end up buying it, things like that. But in that situation, it's a win-win. A, you don't have to worry about the listing expiring, at least anytime soon. And B, the seller is going to be more frankly, I think, agreeable to list with you in the first place, because the listing contract does give them an out, which most listing contracts don't. If you want to learn more about this, you got to join Premier Coaching. Just go to premiercoaching.com or text the word Premier to 47372.
All right, point number 2, prepare your listings, all of your listings, as if you have more competition, even if you don't think you do. Why? Because buyers are getting more picky and they will pass on a home that seems neglected. Even if it's the only one available, they're being more picky. Remember the quote from Lawrence Yun? He said that home inspections have come back. Buyers are starting to believe that there will be more and more inventory soon and may pass on something that doesn't show well or is overpriced. Remember the 7 Ps, proper previous preparation prevents pitifully poor performance. That means you, as well as the house, don't be falling into pitifully poor performance because you didn't prep. Make it shine even if you don't think you have to. Your seller will thank you. Gone are the days where you don't have to put a sign in the yard and you don't have to do a home brochure and you don't have to prep the house. Buyers have become more picky. It doesn't matter if it's the only house on the market, and it's fast becoming not that scenario. There's a lot of competition. I do this analysis with a lot of my private coaching clients where something isn't selling as fast as they'd like, and we look at, well, if I'm a buyer, take your listing agent hat off. I'm the buyer's agent. I'm going to show your listing, but what else am I showing today? And it's not just the competition in that neighborhood. It's the competing neighborhood. It's staying in that school district, perhaps. It's the new construction around the corner. And it's always the option of waiting. So you have to be frosty on all of those things. Prepare your listings as if you have more competition. Maybe you're only going to have 3 showings before it sells, but the third buyer needs to really believe in the home and imagine themselves there, so make it in its best light.
And if you're selling it in a market where there's a lot of relo, well, good news. This is the time of year when a lot of relo buyers buy, so that's a good thing. But what happens is a lot of the relo buyers aren't going to be necessarily loyal to any particular community. So in most established cities, there's going to be 2 or 3, sometimes 4, I think equally as desirable communities. So if you're only an expert in 1 or maybe 2 of those communities, you're not going to really understand the overall nature of the market, and you're going to miss price, which leads us to the next point, Julie.
Point number 3, you must be more careful about accurate pricing on your listings. Do 3 comparative market analysis if necessary. A listing presentation that you go on today where the seller will take 30 days to prep the home, maybe even longer, it's going to require you to revisit the price before you actually launch it as a new listing. This may adjust up, down, or stay the same in a shifting market. What do the new pendings and sales tell you? And I have to give a shout out to Mike Urban, who's part of our EXP family. He did a great video on his social media this morning talking about just this, and it was basically saying, he just had a few sentences that says often he meets with sellers 2 or 3 months before they're ready to list. This is a great time to do an analysis, talk about what your home is worth in today's market and maybe in the first quarter of next year. Call me today so we can at least start the conversation. I thought that was a great thing that plays into this.
So the thing you got to keep in mind is, just using Mike Urban as an example, if he's going on a listing appointment with a seller, and let's say it's early on, the seller hasn't, the house needs work, the time frame works out that they can spend maybe 90 days preparing the house or whatever. So no real time crunch. There's a time crunch in the distant, horizon, but not anywhere near. Well, the challenge is if Mike gets in there too early and he tells the seller a price, like an actual price, this is what we should list it for, to Julie's point, and the price goes up or the price goes down, when he meets with that seller again to hypothetically take the listing, then chances are that's going to create some tension, which might result in him not getting listing. But I'll tell you where the real challenge with that is. If you price the house before you actually are, essentially getting the listing contract signed, you leave the door open for someone to buy the listing from you. In other words, if the seller is meeting, if the seller is meeting with 2 or 3 different agents, and the seller is not going to sign your listing contract that particular day, well, again, my coaching brain is firing off with just having said that. Mm-hmm. Like, we teach you guys to always know if you're competing when you're pre-qualifying. We want you to always go last on the listing appointment, send your listing or your pre-listing package ahead of time. But let's just say you have that weird situation, and I certainly have had coaching clients in this situation before. Mm-hmm. They've done everything right. They've positioned themselves last. They've decided to send their pre-listing pack. They pre-qualified. They know all the seller's motivation. They go there, essentially all ready to take the listing. And then they show up, and then the seller says, well, you know what? My wife knew somebody, and they're going to come over tomorrow at 5 o'clock or whatever. Now, that's a situation where maybe some of the wins out of your sales, but don't think like that. There's a couple strategies, but the main one is you do not want to overly commit to a price, because if that listing agent or the other potential listing agent comes in there and finds out what you told the seller, all they have to do is tell the seller a higher price. And, most cases, that's going to be enough to have the seller seriously consider the other agent. That's called buying the listing. So unless you actually have 100% commitment from that seller or literally getting the contract signed, you got to be super careful putting a firm price on any listing. And, this happens too. You might run into a for sale by owner that only wants to meet you. You won't know they're a FSBO. If you ever have this situation, they're a FSBO. I'll tell you how you can tell. So a seller calls you up and they just want to know, they don't want it like you're trying to, you want to you pre-qualify them, that they kind of run from you on the questions. They're not like really trying to get to know you. You're using all your charm and the rest of it, and they're not really engaging with you. They're kind of keeping you at an arm's length emotionally. And all they want to know is what you think the house is worth. Almost certainly that's a for sale by owner just trying to have you price the house for free. And when you have that sense, when you actually are in that situation, you need to actually bring it up. You need to say, Mr. Seller, a lot of folks nowadays, especially with great houses like yours, are thinking about selling their homes themselves. Are you in that situation as well? And root out of them what their actual motivation is. And you might find yourself having going from just a pricing conversation to actually a listing conversation. But these are all the types of things that if you want to be a successful listing agent, you're going to have to learn. And don't learn on the job. It's too expensive. Learn by joining Premier Coaching. Just go to premiercoaching.com or text the word Premier to 47372. All these little nuanced things when you're talking to sellers makes a huge difference. But here's the good news. Sellers almost always say the same thing. Like when you're pre-qualifying a seller or just having any kind of seller conversation, the conversations, generally speaking, don't follow more than maybe 3 or 4 different patterns. And once you know what the patterns are, you can pretty much, with a high confidence level, predict what the seller is going to say even before they say it. So you're using a script, which is a conversation outline. Our scripts are all questions based. So you're asking these sellers the questions, and based on the last question, you're asking the next question. You kind of know what they're going to say based on the previous question. And what you do is you start building your own, like you'll call it intuition, but really what it is skill. And then it's backed by intuition. That's really the next level, but you're not going to get there unless you follow an actual organized approach. And that's what Premier Coaching is for you. So keep all these things in mind.
That's right. So our next point, number 5, if the seller has to sell, meaning something bad will happen if they don't, you have to take the listing. Don't lose it over being super adamant about, quote, your price. The market still has enough demand that you may be able to achieve the seller's higher price within reason, but you need to have a plan. 2 weeks or 10 showings without an offer means you're missing the market regarding price. Lots of showings but no offers, you probably only need a 3 to 5% adjustment down. Slow or no showings mean you could be way off. There is a clear ratio of motivation and pricing. The more motivated a seller is, the more of a have-to-sell seller they are, the more likely they are to allow you to price the home so that it will sell more quickly. If you have a have-to-sell seller, they may still want to try a higher price for 2 weeks or 30 days or so if they've got the time to do it. So take the listing anyway, but have the 2 weeks or 10 showings conversation so that you're on the same page regarding your strategy.
All right, let's make this practical. So you have you generated the lead, and you're following our 7-step listing process, and you pre-qualified the seller. You know the seller has to sell. There's an absolute 100% hard stop when that house has to be sold. And here's what Julie is saying. Do not let anything, including your ego and your desire to basically win the pricing war with the seller, stand in your way of getting the listing. And that means in some cases you're going to have to overprice it, especially if there's other list agents trying to buy the listing. And that's going to happen in every market, in a market like this. You're always going to have other agents, usually the ones that don't have much to offer other than lower commission and a higher price, to try to woo the seller. Those are the ones that are going to basically screw up pricing, but that's fine. Anticipate it. Know what's going to happen. But you have to take the listing. Do not make it so that it's you against the seller. Do not make it so it's your CMA. And this is absolute lack of business maturity. When you hear agents bragging about, I didn't take the listing because they wouldn't take my price. You read these things all the time. I mean, Julie and I have been in the coaching and training space for decades, and that still makes my skin crawl because guess what? You just talked yourself out of being in a position to help folks and make some money. And because why? The seller wouldn't agree to your price. Guess what? Your price could be wrong. Your CMA could be wrong. In some markets, depending on just, the market conditions, your CMA could be off by as much as 3 or 5%, sometimes 10%. I mean, who listening hasn't overpriced a house knowingly and had the damn thing sell? I mean,
I've been surprised.
You've been surprised,
Occasionally.
right?
Yeah.
You're going to be. We've had it happen when we sold real estate. Certainly, our coaching clients did too.
Yeah.
And so you do not. Here's the big psychological takeaway: when you're like visually, I want you to imagine you're sitting at a table with a seller. And now I bet you the first thought, as I said that, you're thinking of yourself sitting opposite of the seller. You cannot be doing that. I mean, physically or just emotionally. You have to sit beside the seller, and what's sitting across from both of you is the market. And if all of a sudden, right out of the gates, it's you and your CMA against the seller and their expectation, or the seller wants to overprice it and you want to make them wrong, you're the one that's going to be wrong because you're not going to take the listing.
Now, that said, we're talking about have to sell motivated sellers. In other words, someone is going to be paid for helping them accomplish their goal. It should be you.
And you won't know it unless you pre-qualify. Now, the last bit that is in Julie's notes, and you guys got to get these by subscribing to harrisrealestatedaily.com, where obviously this is just an overview. It's not even the scripts, obviously not even close. You only get those in Premier Coaching. But here's the thought. So if you find a seller who wants to overprice, and it's a great listing, and they're motivated. It's a have-to-sell seller. Forced relocation. They can't own 2 homes at once. There's a legal reason they have to sell it. An absolute, gold-plated listing, right? You can take it overpriced, but I want you to be honest about it. Don't lie. Don't be buying listings. Say, Mr. Seller, now that I've seen the property, I completely understand why you think the house is worth, more than what the market is telling us. Remember, you're not saying my CMA. The market is telling us the house is worth $1 million, but now that I've seen it, I can understand why you think it's 1.1 million. I do. It's great. You're right. The backyard is worth it. The difference is that I couldn't, that the CMA didn't tell us are clear once I'm seeing this property. So let's go ahead and get the property listed today for 1.1 million, and let's agree that after 2 weeks or 10 showings, adjust accordingly depending on your market conditioners, listeners. Then we'll reposition the house in the market so that it correctly reflects the market's expectations. Notice I did not say lower the price. Notice I did not use any personal pronouns. Those are all the things that you will learn when you're a coaching client. You need to avoid making it sound like it's you versus them.
It's the market.
Because if it's you versus them, you will lose.
Every time. Yes, that is for sure. Okay, and note to self, in the event that you do need to adjust the price to more accurately represent the expectations of the market, notice we didn't say reduce, slash, or cut, then it's a good time to also get an extension perhaps so that it doesn't expire right when you've got the better price. Again, things that you learn in coaching.
Or just list it for long enough in the first place that
Ideally,
it won't be a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the first 5 points are about dealing with your existing listings you've got in inventory and your upcoming new listings. The last 2 points have to do with keeping your foot on the gas so that you continue to lead generate during fourth quarter, even when it seems slow, and maybe when you even have a snowstorm on the horizon in the holidays, okay? So number 6, commit to and do speaking with 100% of your database before New Year's Day. You can combine pop buys, phone calls, and holiday events to reach everyone. Ask whom they know who could use your help buying or selling real estate. If it's them who needs your help, they will tell you. If you want more repeat and referral business, you have to ask for it. No more being a secret agent.
Now, I'm going to give them a little bit of wiggle room on that point.
Sure.
So I agree 100%. If you've got a really big, crazy database of, you're calling it a database. Let's just see it for what it is. Those aren't even leads. They're basically just people in an electronic system that you're digitally dropping, Well, you're not going to be able to call 10,000 people. That's just not realistic. But you want to know who the best leads are, the best people you could actually call, the ones that are going to have the most meaningful conversations with you. Obviously, they're going to be the ones that transacted with you prior. Obviously, they're going to be the ones that you've had direct conversations with. Maybe it's your kid's teacher or things like that. Those are going to be the best ones to call, especially this time of year. So when you're feeling yourself getting frustrated because it's slower and the emails with leads aren't coming in, the phone calls aren't happening, you got to be the ones proactively calling folks. And there's a lot of scripts we give you in Premier Coaching, but here's the easiest one. The reality of it is if you call everyone, you wish them a happy holiday, and you let them know what's going on in the market and specifically their home's value, and again, the scripts are in Premier Coaching, every single seller you contact is going to be thrilled to hear from you because you're telling them good news. Homes in the last 3 or 4 years have appreciated by 50%. So chances are your seller is in a much better equity situation than they even realize that they are. So who isn't going to want to have that little, good news dribbled in their ear? Now, let's stick with this, okay? Now, let's say you do have an enormous database. You now have, let's say even you have an enormous database of people like Lance Kenmore, for example. Mm-hmm. So send an email to everybody. And in the email, it could be a video. It doesn't really matter. Offer something of value and make it so that it's very clear that it's in the subject line of what it's going to be. And obviously the old traditional things you can, offer them as a home's valuation or something like that. Figure out basically, and there's a lot of things we teach you in Premier Coaching, but offer something of value, and then the ones that self-identify because they opened and engaged with your content, those guys deserve calls. And I'll give you guys an example. So there used to be a company called housevalues.com. This was way back in the 90s, and Julie and I did coaching for them. So housevalues.com would run a lot of really, really good TV commercials, and they're super short, and they would definitely work to generate listing leads. I mean, there was no question. Julie and I were actually housevalues.com subscribers back in I think it was 98 or something.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. And we were the only ones that were subscribing. My brother actually was selling real estate in Seattle where they got started and introduced me to them, and they expanded to Columbus just because we could handle the lead volume. And we would get great listing leads, but they had a terrible script. And so what Julie and I quickly figured out was we call these, so a lot of people were just, I want to know what my home's worth, and that's the extent of it, normal CMA stuff. So we would call them back, and that's where we really started to drill down on our script. So we'd get a lead, and we taught our buyers agents to do this, or sometimes on the more expensive ones, I'd call them back. And I would say, hey, this is Tim Harris with House Values and RE/MAX at the time. And I received your request for your CMA on your home. I'm going to get started on it right away. And then I'm going to verify a few of the points you said. It's a 4-bedroom, 2 baths. Are there any improvements you made? Things like that. So I'm going to review some of the things that they said and clarify some of the things they said. And then I'd hit them with this question. I'd say, so ideally, how soon do you want this property sold? And I would just shut up. That's all I would say. It's totally, completely out of the natural flow of that prior conversation where I was asking him about the house. Ideally, Mr. Seller, how soon do you want to get this home sold? And here's what they'd say probably 8 times out of 10. Oh, no, I just wanted the home's value. Is this only if I want to sell my home? No, it's fine. I'll go ahead and do the CMA for you. But obviously, it's going to be more of a generalized CMA. But 2 times out of 10, I would hear them give me a straight answer. We're going to put it on the market in the spring. You guys get it? So you have to call people back. So if you're going to be if you do have a big sort of ungainly database, do send something that's going to be of value to them. And the ones that engage in the content, don't just stick digitally with following up with them. Call them, and that's going to be how you actually convert more of your list to leads. And that's a good practice, even if you're building your database to carry forward forever.
It's a good way to curate your database is to talk to them more and really pull out the facts. I like that you pointed that out because a lot of our listeners do have a more vast database. It's a great way to create maybe your top 100 or top 200, something like that.
Well, look at our database, okay? Yeah. So we have a newsletter, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. We have 30,000 subscribers. They're all double opt-in. And we have on any given day, we'll have as much as almost 70% open rate, which is outrageous.
Awesome.
It's really good. Mm-hmm. Well, it's because they all, it's our people, right?
Our people.
So we'll have a huge open rate. But I can, and here's what I'm going to do. In the list, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the people that are engaging with the newsletters on a regular basis. So if someone hasn't opened one of our newsletter emails in 90 days, we're just going to remove them. They don't need to be in there. And also it'll help with getting the open ratios even higher too. But the point of it is that you have these big databases. Look for the ones that are actually engaging with you and that are paying attention to what you have to say and focusing on those people. And that'll help you to really pull a lot of the lowest hanging apples off your tree.
Very well said. All right, last point is another thing to commit to fourth quarter. Remember, our topic today is what to do when things get a little bit slower. Number 7, commit to finding the right home for your motivated and qualified buyers. We know you have tons of them out there. If they're not already pending just because you've yet to find them something, you need to be more proactive. Please do not lose your buyers because they're looking harder than you are. Who's in your pipeline right now who needs your help this week or this month? What are you doing beyond the MLS to accomplish their real estate goals? Remember, too, as part of Ethical Real Estate Professional, you'll get the Beyond the MLS search guarantee to offer your buyers to show them what you're doing that answers that question. Because guess what? If you're only using the MLS and the MLS feeds into Realtor.com and Zillow and all the rest, well, you're not really doing anything more than they can, right? So you've got to solve that problem. You're also going to get a lot more tools, scripts, and skills that we've been talking about, ramping you guys up for the Ethical Real Estate Professional designation. So text the word BUYER, BUYER, to 47372 to get on that list before it's too late.
And remember, you can also go to Ethical Real Estate Professional. We put an opt-in form on that website, so you can check that out as well. Ethical Real Estate Professional, we believe, is going to be the first of several designations we're going to create, but the first one's going to be for exclusive buyers agency. It's going to really revolutionize the real estate industry. We're incredibly excited about it. Frankly, getting a little exhausted on building it. It just, you and I added 3 new content pieces to it today.
Of course.
I mean, of course, right? And we're working on the webinar and all the funnels and all the rest of it. But what this is going to do, it's only going to be available to 2,500 agents ever nationwide. It's going to be an elite group of agents who have taken their ethical real estate professionals designation pledge. Really what we're trying to do is we're giving you guys the ultimate differentiator in your marketplace. And you don't have to worry about, chances are you're not going to have to worry about ever competing against another EREP designee because there's only 2,500 of these for the entire country. This is going to be the thing that you want to have in your toolbox as you roll into 2025 that will truly differentiate you. Yes, I get it. You're an EXP agent. You're a Compass agent. It doesn't matter. Unless you're something beyond that, you're competing with a bunch of other agents that have, oh, you're an EXP luxury agent. That's great. Congratulations. But there's also 5,000 other, 10,000, 15 other agents in your marketplace practically that have that same you see how there's no point of differentiation? Differentiation comes when you're not competing with yourself constantly, right? So that's what EREP is going to be for all of you. So text the word buyer, BUYER, to 47372. If you want to check out what the website's all about, you can go to ethicalrealestateprofessional.com and you can see what it's truly going to be. And once you get it, once it clicks in your head, you're going to, frankly, I cannot imagine that all of you won't be beyond words excited to participate. So go to ethicalrealestateprofessional.com or text the word buyer to 47372 to get on the list. Either way, the launch for this event, I mean, we keep on trying to do it in 2 weeks, but there's, I don't want to have it come out unless it's something that when you guys see it for the first time, you're not absolutely spellbound by how cool it is. So it's taking longer, but I'd rather have it take longer than be something that we're really proud of because we know it's going to help you guys make money, especially going to the new year, than something that's, only 90%. So it's taking longer than we'd hoped, but it's going to be something that's beyond what I think all of us really could have even possibly imagined, especially when we started.
It has definitely grown. And, it's every tool that you're going to need. It's something I hope you guys can hear that we're really proud of it in our voices, but we want it to also have the polish that you've come to expect from us. I think it's pretty close, but there's some tweaking that we still have to do.
Well, we added, a whole open house system. We added
ultimate addendum.
The ultimate addendum. Yeah. So anyway, go to ethicalrealestateprofessional.com. But to get on the invite list, text the word buyer to 47372. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.